In today's sort of pictographic Dhamma talk, we're talking about the bigger picture of the five aggregates and dependent origination and how it all links in with, as you can see, karma. So we live as moments of consciousness, and recent quantum physics findings revealed by this gentleman in a talk by the Mountain Monastery hosted by Ajahn Kovilo and Ajahn Nisabo, where they interviewed Professor Bogdan Stajewski. I'm sorry if I've absolutely ruined that, but anyway, it's a really interesting talk where they talk about the recent quantum physics findings, which describes the fact that consciousness has been found to be a process, a recurring, constant recurring process, which as per Buddhist findings by the Buddha almost 2,600 years ago, is that consciousness is also a process which is constantly recurring, up and down, recurring, as you can see. And in this diagram, effectively what you've got is a recurring set of processes that propels consciousness from moment to moment. It's where you've got form, feeling, cognition, thought, consciousness. And at each moment of consciousness, because of this energy that we generate at this point called the axis of volition, for the sake of this talk, that propels our karmic energy into the next moment of consciousness, where we again then get, we're confronted with phenomena which then progress to empower the next moment of consciousness, and so on, so on, and so forth. So let's go into that in the next image. We have it here, this rather large blow up of what we are trying to discuss here, these moments of consciousness, or effectively, this is, if you represent, if we talk about it as the present moment, then we have these other moments of consciousness in the past, as you can see, and future moments of consciousness to come. In Buddhism, the idea being to try and stop this cycle, or try and stop this movement or motion, and at the point of nibbana or parinibbana, then we stop moments of consciousness from recurring, and that allows us to check out of prison samsara, as the nun Tenzin Palmo describes well in her dream that she had. So effectively, if we talk through this blow-up diagram, we have the five aggregates here, which is form, feeling, cognition, and then you've got thought formation, sankhara, and consciousness. And then right here, we've got this axis of volition, where at this point, based on our samsara habits a lot of the time, but also when we develop mindfulness, we can actually control that and stop those samsara habits from having an effect on us. And we can choose to react to what we're being faced with at the point of form, or in this point here. This is just expanded for the purposes of explanation, but it all happens here in this present moment. And at this point, we can choose to react with positive karmic seeds, neutrality or equanimity, or negative karmic seeds. And all of these karmic seeds that we produce will present themselves as phenomena or rupa, or in this form, or in this diagram, form, and they present themselves as present phenomena. Now, it's been said by the Buddhist teachings that there is in fact no end to our past lifetimes, or the beginning of samsara. No one can find it. It's endless. So therefore our past karma is also endless. You could almost use the word rich. So it's endless. It's there, and it can present itself, and it fills our current existences with whatever the circumstances that we find ourselves in. And so therefore this past karma fills our current world and governs our current world with positive phenomena, positive states of being, negative states of being, or just plain being amidst all of it. So in reality then, what we're surrounded with is all these phenomena and existence governed by past karma. How we react to it, as I said, is oftentimes because of our past habits or our conditioning, our current lifetime conditioning, but also our past lifetime conditioning, our samsara habits, or hotel or prison samsara, and the habits we develop by those around us. And that all of that comes into play in this present moment, and therefore our present circumstances, which is captured by this giant blue oval. The conditions we find ourselves in, the people we find ourselves surrounded by, and also the thought formation or the karmic actions that we perform in this present moment. And then those karmic seeds proceed to bear fruit, bear flower in the future, and present themselves in the similar fashion as has been depicted here. And at this point we can choose to exercise this element of volition. So prior to the Buddha's arrival and his enlightening, all of his masters and the rishis and their practice, meditative practice for thousands of years prior, dictated that it's all preordained, it's destiny, everything's as it is, it's all pre-written. We don't really have any control over any of this. It is the way it is, and even the way that we react is just the way it is. But when Buddha turned up, he said, not really. In fact, there is an element of volition that we can exercise, an element of control, and that is we can exercise that level of control in our present moment. We can choose to react, as I said, positively, or ideally with equanimity, or negatively. And some of us may have past habits that choose to lead us down this negative karmic seeds pathway, which isn't ideal, because when they ripen, we can have a really horrendous time, because they come back to us with horrendous results. So the Buddha's therefore teaching of non-self, where there is no constant or persisting self that persists across time. In fact, it's constantly changing, as illustrated by this diagram. It's constantly changing. It's constantly changing. Each moment of consciousness changes us. I'm not the same person I was, when I was born 50, almost 50 years ago. I'm not the same person I was when I was 20, 30 years ago. I'm certainly not the same person I was 10 years ago, let me tell you. My fitness is nowhere near what it was when I was 40. But the reality is we are constantly changing. And that is reflected in this diagram, because we are this blue oval now will be at each moment we are changing. And part of that is because we can, as the Buddha said, exercise at this axis of volition, I call it, between thought formation, sankhara, the fourth aggregate, and consciousness. We can choose to exercise volition and go down a path of neutrality, or at the very least positivity. And I'll talk about that in a future talk with regarding metta and its interlinks with karma. And we'll talk about that in another talk. But again, this axis of volition is really important, where we choose to act with at least equanimity. So yes, equanimity is the ideal reaction that we want to have to whatever presents to us in this present moment of consciousness as a rupa or a form, or through the senses of vision, hearing, sensation, smell and taste, and also mind moments, or conscious mind thoughts. So how they present and then how we react really determines the type of karma that we create, and therefore the determinants of our future, and how that karma bears fruit in the future. So with the five aggregates, we've got form, feeling, cognition, thought formation, and consciousness. And then sankhara, you'll see that in brackets here. Why is it there? Because these first three aggregates we cannot really perceive nor exert any control over. But through persistent meditation, we can actually start to exert control at this point, this thought formation point, this axis of volition, as I've taken liberty to name here, between thought formation and where consciousness turns up. We can exert control here. This is what the Buddha was talking about. Well, at that point, we can slow down our reaction, stop our automation, stop this, or exert awareness, mindful awareness of these samsara habits that we may have, or lifetime habits we may have, and choose to stop, take a step back, exert mindful awareness, and then, if need be, react or walk away with equanimity. Don't need to walk away, you can just stay still and exercise equanimity. And that's really important, because if we go to that other slide again, we've got, once again, form, feeling, cognition, thought, consciousness, and at this point, this axis of volition, we throw out a karmic result, which then leads to the next cycle of dependent origination. Dependent origination, where if we dissect that term altogether, origination is here, isn't it? It's within this blue capsule. It's dependent on the axis of volition and the karmic seeds that we set about, or karmic seed we set about at each and every conscious moment. So we're getting into the territory of the Abhidhamma. This is the higher, bit more expounded or extrapolated Dhamma that Ananda asked the Buddha to talk about, because he was going up into the higher realms and discussing this knowledge with his birth mother, who had expired only a matter of days following his birth, and then reborn in that high realm. So these knowledges were quite advanced, and so he wanted to capture that, and this is what the Buddha told him. We exist as moments of consciousness. Fascinating, because this gentleman talks about the fact that the most recent findings from quantum physics, the field of quantum physics, has discovered that consciousness is process driven, and it is also moment by moment by moment. And each of those moments, they have found they are process driven. They're recurring moments of processes that recur. So it's fascinating that this piece of knowledge expounded by Gautama Buddha, Sakyamuni Buddha, almost 2,600 years ago, describes this very process. Now, I'm not really doing it any justice because it's a lot more detailed than that, and I would suggest that this talk that I'm giving you is very carefully paired with this talk by the Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi in a series of talks put together by @1983 Dukkha YouTube channel, and this is talk number 4 by Bhikkhu Bodhi on dependent origination. This is, as one of the comments says, probably one of the most important Dhamma lectures I've listened to. I would flex on that and say this is probably one of the most important talks given on dependent origination. So this is a rather a lengthy talk, but every word that comes out of Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's mouth is worth its weight in some sort of ultra valuable material somewhere in the universe. Gold probably doesn't do it justice. It's called Dhamma, in fact. So please have a listen to this talk from Bhikkhu Bodhi in relation to this pictographical talk that I'm giving you today. So in summation, really, you've got this process of karma where we're laying seeds of karma in the present moment, and at this axis of volition, which you can start to perceive with persistent meditation, learn to act with mindful awareness in the present moment, with whatever you're hearing, seeing, etc., feeling. Exercise mindful awareness before you react. Slow things down, slow your mind processes down, and exercise carefully the sort of karmic seeds you want to lay. Because our past karma is in fact endless, as verified by many people that have had past life insights, have the ability to spontaneously visit their past lives and explore the extent of the beginning of samsara. And many have said there just isn't one. They simply cannot find. They've spent many hours, days, years, probably lifetimes trying to find that beginning, and they just can't. So therefore, do not take this past karma for granted. It is endless, and it in fact governs all of our surroundings, all of our present circumstances, because it's that vast. So therefore, everything that fills this blue capsule here is all governed by our past karma. So being very careful and judicious about the seeds that we lay in this present moment is really important. Really important. So how do we do that? By exercising mindful awareness, mindfulness meditation, very useful. And when you start to perceive this axis of volition, or the ability to exercise volition with and having mindfulness over your habits or your your tendencies that you may have developed from the past or even in this lifetime, being able to rise above and avoid the dasa akusala is something that I've talked about in one of my previous talks or podcasts, which are the 10 unwholesome acts, trying to avoid those and certainly try and live by the precepts, the 5 precepts at a very minimum, at the 8 precepts if you can, and the 10 precepts on full moon days or Sila days. It's really important that we exercise judicious caution about the sorts of karmic seeds we're laying forward. And then if you're trying to aim for the higher goals of Nibbana, which is the extinction of our existence in this samsaric realm, again, a great talk by Tenzin Palmo, again, and I'll leave the link to that. Links to all the talks that are relevant and that I'm mentioning in the links below. But in her dream, she talks about the fact that we're all trapped in this hotel samsara, or she calls it a jail called samsara, which I prefer the term hotel but it's locked, and at night you can only check out through the front desk if you can, and if they let you. So it's like the song Hotel California for people that know rock and roll. You can check in, but you may never check out. But you can check out, and this is the way, is by exercising that mindfulness and choosing through meditation, through the development of your practice, you can stop this from perpetuating by really focusing on the practice of equanimity, and by eliminating all the fetters, progressing through meditation, eliminating the fetters and getting to that end of Nibbana, which is the whole point of Buddhist practice and Buddhism, you will be able to stop this process from continuing. So now for the clock of samsara. So let's imagine this diagram as the movements of a pendulum in a grandfather clock, or as I've got here, a grandmother clock, just because it's a bit more compact. So the impetus or the energy for this pendulum to move forwards at this side of its swing is our action, or sankhara, or the axis of volition, our volitional act, whether it be a positive act, an equanimous act, or neutral karma act, or a negative karma act. So positive, neutral, or negative. That, usually the positive or the negative, causes a swing to create the next causal factor, which is a form, to then make the pendulum swing again. So it's going tick tock, tick tock. So this is really the fundamental nature of the movement of consciousness, and therefore the energy and the cycle that drives dependent origination. So we have thought of it as being like the clock of the pendulum of a clock, a grandfather clock. So really then, to stop that pendulum of a grandfather clock, what we need to do is to stop this pendulum from moving. And we can stop that by, in this case, exercising equanimity. What drives this pendulum in dependent origination is karma. So in the same way, we can liken it to what we've got here, which is lovely grandmother clock, and And we can liken this pendulum movement to the movement of dependent origination. Moment by moment, each moment of consciousness is being driven by a volitional act, a karmic act. So what's powering this clock and its pendulum? A mainspring, an energy, which in the case of dependent origination and our moments of consciousness is karma. So we can't really run out of karma. It's there everywhere, and as we've discussed, it's infinite. But what we can do through mindful awareness and the practice of meditation and the practice of equanimity is stop this pendulum from moving, or the pendulum of dependent origination. And we can stop it by practicing equanimity. And the pendulum stops. So that's the simile of the grandfather clock, or in this case, grandmother clock, and this pendulum to dependent origination. Its power comes from a mainspring that's wound using one of these keys, and that's the mainspring, which in our case is the infinite sea of karma that we find ourselves in, that we've created from our immediate lifetime, our current lifetime, our proximal past, or our infinitely distant past. We are surrounded by a sea of karma, and it presents itself in this fulcrum, which is the tip of this pendulum in this clock. And then if we want to stop our karma from manifesting, we have to stop it by stopping this pendulum from swinging. In our case, that's the practice of equanimity, and that will stop karma from generating, and that's nibbana. And then when we pass away, ultimately then that's parinibbana, which is the complete cessation of our existence in samsara. Okay.